Catalyst 2030 started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
All right, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Rana Dajani to lead the session.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, salamu alaikum, wherever you are around the globe. We're so happy that you are able to join us today. We have a fantastic panel and a great topic that we're going to discuss, and we really, really appreciate your input. So please put your questions and comments in the chat. Let it be a very active chat. This is a participatory format of a panel and discussion. And later you can raise your hand if you want to speak or comment as well as the chat. This session is very important because it talks about the hallmarks of successful networks. And these touch on all the SDGs. You need a good network in order to be able to reach those SDGs. And with a focus on SDG 17, which is all about partnerships. Because partnerships are how we can work together to achieve success globally in the 21st century. And today with COVID-19, we've seen the importance of collaboration across the globe. So in this panel, we're going to look at people from different networks across the globe and to try to understand from them what are the challenges in creating these networks and spreading them, and what are the best practices so that we can all learn from each other in our own networks, whatever size they are, so that we can achieve the goals that we aim to implement impact globally. So I'm going to start by introducing first myself. I'm a professor of molecular biology and the president of the Society for Advancement of Science and Technology in the Arab World, which is a network of senior scientists in diaspora all over the globe. So that's one network holding a scientist, senior scientist kind of group of people. The other kind of hat that I wear is that I'm a social entrepreneur and a Ashoka Fellow. And I have my own network of social entrepreneurs. We call them We Love Reading ambassadors. So I have a society that works on changing mindsets through reading to create change makers. So that's a different network of people. These are like everyday people, grassroots all over the world. We are in 62 countries. And that's a network that we also want to maintain, scale and spread and address their challenges and their needs. The third network I belong to is Catalyst 2030, which, as you saw from the video, is an amazing network that is only like a year and a few months old, but has proven to be, has a wonderful structure and strategy that we also want to share and discuss and work on. So I'm representing those 3 as we go through this discussion. Next, we have Tonya Blowers, who is the coordinator at OWSD, and OWSD is a network of female scientists in developing countries. So she represents a network of female scientists. We also have Professor Clinzy from Guatemala, who is an OWSD member and head of the chapter of Guatemala, and she's going to also represent the female network of scientists in developing countries on the grounds, grassroots. And what's neat about what Clincy is going to share with us is she started this network very new. So we're going to see about her experience on the ground, like fresh and raw, what's happening, especially during COVID-19. Our third fourth person on this panel is Ahmad Jadallah, and he represents a network called FI of young people, men and women, who are interested in science across the MENA region, the Middle East, North Africa. And why MENA? Because, there's so many challenges that they're facing, from unemployment to highly educated, to COVID, to refugees and war. So he represents that network of youth. How do you channel, how do you gather those? So with these fascinating networks and the people that represent them, we're going to start this panel. So thank you for joining. I'm going to give a brief format how this panel is going to go along. I'm going to ask you questions and go around, and please feel free to jump in, to comment on each other. This is an open conversation, and we will always be monitoring the chat. So again, please, all the audience, please put your questions and comments in the chat. And if you have a burning comment, just raise your hand. We'll invite you to also participate so that we can hear your voice as well. Great. So now that we are ready to go, I'm going to start with Tonya with my first question. And this is going to be the same for all the other panelists, is to tell us a little bit about the structure of your network, because each network has a different structure depending on the objectives, goals, and the kinds of people who are part of it. So if you could explain to us a little bit about the structure of your network, and maybe elaborate on the challenges a little bit that you face as you expand that network. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rana. It's great to be here. Lovely to see everyone. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Tonya Blowers. I'm the coordinator of the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World, otherwise known as OWSD or OWSD. And I have a background, I have a PhD in women and gender, and I've been working at OWSD since 2013. And I also have worked a lot in science communications, and in another life, I was doing a lot of work in literature and autobiography and colonial theory. So it's kind of all come together in this wonderful organization. The structure of OWSD is very interesting. So we're a membership organization fundamentally. So we were established over 30 years ago now as a membership organization. And the principle of this membership was that you needed to be a woman from a developing country, living and working in a developing country, working in science. And then you could become a member. But the point of our membership was that it was not an elective or selective elite membership. It was very much, if you had the qualifications, which to be a full member are simply that you should have at least a master's degree in a STEM subject, and have a nationality or residence in a developing country. So you would, in the olden days, of course, you would send in your paper form and your PhD certificate, and then all of your details would get transcribed, and it could take some weeks before you knew if you had become a member. Now everything is online. It's very efficient, very quick. And as I say, it's not a selection process. So as long as you've uploaded the correct documents, you will be approved. We're not interested in anything else except the eligibility. So we now have, currently we have over 7,000 members, and we're divided into 4 regions. So that's Asia Pacific, Arab countries, Latin America and the Caribbean, sorry, now I've got, what have I lost? Africa, sorry. Of course, over half of our members are based in Africa. 52% of our members are in Africa. And each of the regions is headed by 2 members of our executive board who represent the members. So we have a vice president and a regional member who kind of interact with the members in the regions. If there are more than 20 members in any country, they can establish an OWSD national chapter, and Clincy will tell you much more about the details of how that works in practice. But a national chapter, really the idea of a national chapter is that it's an opportunity for the members in that specific country to get together to decide what their current situation is, what their challenges are, and how they would like to solve those challenges. But so in a sense, each chapter defines its own agenda at the same time as fitting in to the kind of international objectives and agenda of OWSD, the international organization. So that's a kind of brief overview, and I can always fill in some more details afterwards. Over to you, Rana.
Thank you. That's great. So you mentioned Latin America as one of the places, but you have a footprint. But I learned from you earlier that you don't have that many people there. And that's how I got to know Clinzy, who is an amazing scientist who has started her chapter there. And so we'd like to hear from you, Clinzy. First, introduce yourself and then tell us about how you started your chapter, elaborating on those, what are those lessons learned and challenges overcome as you expanded that chapter?
Thank you very much. My deepest appreciation for being invited to this online event, is particularly to Tonya because she put us in contact, and I'm delighted to share with you some of our experiences from Central America, which is a sub-region from Latin America, and we belong, or we are part of OWSD as a global organization, global network. And to be honest, it's been a kind of long journey. I'm 40 years old. It's been the last 3 years that connected everything, as Tonya said. Everything is making sense. I was raised and lived in Guatemala my entire life until I finished university, the undergraduate, and I had to, as many Central Americans do, immigrate or try to find some opportunities to be educated overseas. Usually, for decades, we have been trained and educated through scholarships from different sources of cooperation because we have kind of weak and underdeveloped higher education systems. When I mean Central America, we are 6 countries, very small countries. In total, we are 25 million population: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. And we belong to Latin America, where we are 22 countries. So I went to study economics of development in South Korea, and I lived there for 8 to 9 years. And then I realized the importance of science and technology to explain the economic development of Korea. Later, after I finished my master's degree and my PhD, I returned to Guatemala, and I have always kept these realities, these challenging realities in my mind. So trying to comparing, contrasting, and learning lessons. That's why I decided to return to Latin America, because the moment we are so different in higher education, in science and policies, comparing, I mean, that part of Asia. So I returned to Chile, because in Latin America, we have very contrasting realities also. We share language, Catholicism, culture, but the southern part, the South America, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, have a bit more of advancement compared to Central America, as I'm saying. So I lived there 3 years, studying the economic development process of Chile, always thinking in science and technology. And currently, it's been 4 years since I'm living in Brazil. That's why I'm currently related to University of Campinas. In short, everything explained, and I'm interested in one question that was placed by one of the attendees. How many networks do we belong to? Because it also explains a bit of our interest and our journey. And where I experienced and I observed things in Chile, in Brazil, in Asia, and of course I had the opportunity to see something in Europe and North America, I realized several of the explanations why we took so long in Central America to consolidate our membership to OWSD, for example. And as I mentioned, 22 countries, but from these 22 countries in Latin America, some of them are priority for OWSD because we are lagging behind scientifically and technologically speaking. And we are trying to understand why we took so long, and there are several explanations that we will discuss during the panel. But in short, I am the chair of the Guatemala, which is my my home country. And we are already 400 members, 400, and we build up this network, and I will share with you later some of the learnings, because we have, of course, overcame many challenges, but the pandemic, also provided opportunities for sharing with other countries within Latin America, but also from other parts of the world. So that's currently what is going on. And just in short, the question was a bit of my background, and I belong to OWSD in Guatemala and Latin America, but I also am a member of a couple of other networks where I also can share some of the learnings. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we love your daughter. And that's another network of being a parent and taking care of our kids in our everyday life. So very, very, very nice. Okay, so we're going to go around to Ahmad. Please introduce briefly just the structure of your network and what it is, and then we're going to go around to delve deeper into what are those challenges in spreading the network.
Of course. Thank you, Dr. Rana, and thank you everyone here for inviting me. I'm very delighted to be part of this panel. Well, very briefly about PhiScience and what we do. So PhiScience started as a network of young scientists. It started here in Jordan as a reaction to all the obstacles in science and research facing young scientists. Especially when you talk about Jordan and the MENA region, you will find like universities research output in universities are constantly declining, and if there is any output, it's usually not that strong, and students, they're not involved at all in that mechanism. So it started there, and to start building that network of young researchers, we started in spreading science. And I still remember the first time we conducted an event about stem cells with you, Dr. Rana, here in Jordan, in Amman, and then we started working from students to students, conducting these workshops. That was like 6-7 years ago, and since then the network started growing exponentially. Not because what we were providing was like unique. It was like a network for young scientists, trying to support them in all ways possible, but because it filled a huge need, and maybe that's one of the important things that we can talk about later in terms of how you can face some of the challenges filling that need in specific. Today we are a huge network of more than 3,000 people registered on our professional platform. We have more than 80,000 followers that are either attended our summits, attended our online events, our events on the ground, or have been researchers with us. And we have a network of ambassadors. So it's a network inside the network, like the whole network members, but like the top members, they're qualified now to become PHI's ambassadors, and those ambassadors are like around the top 300 that are helping us with everything that we're doing. So although we are like 13 team members, core team members, those 300 are helping us all the time, and without them we will never achieve what we're currently achieving. So that's one of the second ways how you can face some of the challenges in your network as well, once we talk about that later on. So that was a very quick introduction about PhiScience and what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad, and I really appreciate your joining. Ahmad got very sick early this morning, yet with a fever, he's here with us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We hope you feel better.
Of course, thank you.
And that you get this energy, boost your adrenaline and your immune system, and all of us as well. Great. So people have shared different structures of networks, and I'm going to share a Catalyst network. Since I've been involved in many, most of the ones I've involved in are similar to what you have described, OWSD or Phi, and the typical networks where there's a hierarchy of some sort, there's chapters and so on. I think what is unique about Catalyst 2030, and I want to share this, is that it's very flat. It's very flat. There's no expectations from anyone on anyone. And so what you put in is what you get out. And I think having that kind of mindset permeating the network is very liberating, because it allows you to expand as much as you want. You don't have to ask permission from anybody. There are no rules, there are no guidelines. And you lead. Whatever, if you have an idea, you just start it and people will gather around you. So it's very organic. And I think as an evolutionary biologist, I think that's the best way for things to evolve, when they're organic. And because it's organic, it by itself automatically filters those who are interested from those who are not. Because if you're not interested, you just drop off, because you're not, I mean, nobody's giving you anything. So there's no benefit in the sense that you're going to get a label or a reward. It's just how much work you put in. So I think that's very, very interesting. However, going to, and it requires a mind shift of mindsets, by the way, because many people come into the group and think, okay, so what should we do? Or who should we ask permission? And when they realize that Catalyst doesn't have any of that, they think, wait, they feel lost, first of all, because this is not very typical. But then it's like when you throw somebody in the deep end of a swimming pool, if they relax and follow their motivation and passion, they finally are able to swim and float. However, having said that, I'm as part of Catalyst, we were trying to champion different regional chapters. And one of them was, since I come from Jordan, to champion the MENA chapter. And I kind of hit a wall, all right? So I couldn't find enough people because, and I don't know why, right? So I'm posing this as a challenge that I faced. And I don't know why. Is it that the people, there are no social entrepreneurs in the Middle East? Of course, that's wrong. There must be, it's just they don't know who they are. Or is it that people are expecting a particular framework, and this Catalyst is so different that people don't know how to handle it? I don't know either. So this, what I ask of you, we want to learn from each other. And what are the, because I think every network has its pros and cons. So how can we learn the best practices and so on? But before best practices, we need to talk about the challenges. So I would love to hear, again, going around, starting from Tonya, what are the challenges in spreading your network? And then we'll go around again. So Tonya, the floor is yours.
I think OWSD is really interesting in this respect. Since, I mean, we have been going for a long time, right? 30 years is a long time. And I think what's happened over those years is that we've changed from being a kind of a top-down network into a bottom-up network. And Kleinsey's arrival on the scene as a young, dynamic scientist who's establishing and making these connections is kind of the other end. That's where we're at now, which is really exciting. But at the beginning, what happened was, because we have an executive board structure, it was basically the executive board members who were the founders of the first national chapters that we had. And these tended to also be the bigger emerging countries. So we got India, China, Mexico also. We had some chapters established at the beginning, and they kind of just carried on going and each national chapter has also got an executive committee structure, right? So they have what used to be called a president, it's now called a chair, a treasurer, a secretary. You need to have at least 4 board members to run the chapter. So you can imagine there's a lot of scope there for a kind of seniority, not, let's say, not a very, it's not a very democratic process necessarily. But over the years, what's happened is we've managed to create more and more processes. So I think what's interesting about OWSD as well, is another thing that's very interesting about a kind of international network like ours, is that you have a coordinating center, right? And we are, perhaps controversially, perhaps difficult. It's difficult. We're based in Italy, the Secretariat, right? But it also gives us a very neutral space here. And it's our task to kind of field all of the interest that comes in and try and enable and put people together so that they can create chapters. Because what's happens is you get individual scientists in the countries who don't know each other, right? They don't know that they exist. Especially women scientists in the countries that we work with, where we give fellowships, for example. By definition, they are the poorest countries in the world with the least resources. That also means that their communication systems are very, very challenging. Internet, of course, only very, very recently that many of them have come on board with internet. So how do you make links with the individuals so that they know that each other exists, so that they can then form their national chapter, and then it starts to snowball? And as I said, originally it was through the executive board, but over the years, what's happened is because we have created a whole community of women who have received grants from OWSD for PhDs and for now more recently for early career. They are very knowledgeable about what the organization stands for, and they want also to give back to the organization. And so they bring a kind of knowledge and an enthusiasm and an energy, which is really wonderful. And of course, they have their own connections in different countries. So the network starts to evolve in that way. Maybe I'll just stop there, just throwing that in at the,
Yeah, I'd like you to elaborate quickly before I go to Lindsay, talk about how she got her people to know each other in her country. You mentioned how you talked about communication, and you talked about how did that flourish or not during COVID-19?
Well, I think Lindsay's got some fantastic examples there, but I mean, I would say, what's been very interesting is, okay, on the one hand, it's been difficult because the whole point of the national chapters are that they are an in-person possibility, a community where you meet and you share your ideas and your difficulties and your challenges, and those wonderful sort of sessions where you say, I'm finding it really difficult with my supervisor, he's harassing me. And then another woman said, well, yeah, I've got the same situation. And then they might go off and talk together, and they're sharing these situations. There's huge value in the face-to-face. And what had been happening, it's a very recent thing, but over the last 3 years, I'd say, we started a tradition of launching the national chapters. So these became when there was a new national chapter established, it would be a wonderful event. There was a tradition that started in Rwanda with a big cake that the Minister of Education would come and cut with the president of the national chapter, and lots of local dignitaries would be invited. So this was a kind of really important in-person event. All of these launches had to stop during COVID, right? But so then people were thinking about alternatives. How can we still establish ourselves? And what's tended to happen, and again, Klein's has got some great examples of this, but what's tended to happen is, instead of being individual chapters, the chapters have been linking with each other and, creating more regional events and sharing best practices. It's been very, very interesting from that point of view.
Thank you. You actually touched on something that was brought up in the chat, which is how do we start, right? Is it, you talked about, people getting together in person, having this launching event that's kind of festive and has these important people, which in a way is good in terms of morale, but it also adds pressure for something to be not easygoing and loose and so on. So how do you achieve that balance? And one of the comments by, I think, David, and a question from Anna was about, less is more. The more the network is loose and doesn't have all this hierarchy and all these requirements, not just in terms of eligibility, but what actually is done, the more people can run with it, but then you have the risk of, losing it altogether. So that's something to, how do you keep that balance? How do you attract members? And I know Ahmed has something to talk about that, but I want to hear from Lindsay to briefly explain to us in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, how she started how did she attract the members? How did she get their support, their commitment? And how did she become 400 in what was it, like a 1 or 2 years or less? Please share with us.
All right, thank you very much. So many things to say, but I will try to be concise and build up on what Tonya shared. The thing was, you mentioned, how do we start? And we didn't start from zero. We acknowledged things that were built before us, but we faced the first problem. There was a generational divide and a way to exercise leadership. Before, for a long time, there were associations of women in science, academies of science, but they were built based on prestige, the recognition, honors, and then you had to prove you were somebody with so many accomplishments that left many people outside. So we didn't want to not erase, but we wanted to acknowledge everything that was built before us, but we needed something different. And we invited all the previous and long trajectory scientists, women scientists. But the thing is, There were social networks, communications booming, and some of them were not at that point. We didn't have this idea of mentoring very established, and so that wasn't the in terms of leadership, but in terms of convincing what's in there for me, because we preach that, okay, I will give my time, I will be a volunteer, everything is on volunteer, but I will also gain for my career development. So to understand what are the benefits, mentoring, access to fellowships, understanding the career, in the case of women, what sharing support. So it's very challenging, but that's what the first thing we faced. And when you say what structure, we had a basic structure, but understanding OWSD as a community was difficult, because at the beginning everybody understood NGOs, are we a legal organization or not? We function with a host institution, for example, to have a banking account. Can we execute or receive funding, financing? That's a complicated part for the beginning, but we overcame many of the obstacles by having a balanced executive committee with members with trajectory, but also with early career researchers and those with just at the beginning. So to have a kind of a ladder and to see them, okay, I can have this aspiration, I can move on, and the ones who have a more trajectory, pull others and we push them, and then we help each other. But it takes time to understand that logic, for example. But let me stop there and let's continue the conversation.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you. And we know that you have an article coming out soon about how you started your chapter. So we look forward to being able to read that and share it when it comes out. But you mentioned something, and I want to play the devil's advocate here. About having a legal structure, a bank account, some kind of format. And here I want to challenge: can we imagine a network that is not like that? And maybe the extreme. I mean, of course, you have two extremes of the spectrum. You have the very structured hierarchy, right? And then you have things that are less and less, which you're discussing here, the different networks. But can we imagine where the network is totally unstructured? And I think in that context, we can call it a social movement, maybe, where it's like a good virus that spreads across the globe, building on shared values or goals. As somebody in the chat mentioned, if you have a common goal, then people will just come all together to achieve that goal, each one putting in their best and their most, because as one of our Catalyst members, Jack Sim, says, the sum of us will be a lot more than if we just say 1 + 1. So 1 + 1 equals a lot more than just 2. But how do we remove the self? How do we ensure that people are giving their most without having this accountability and all that? So I think the clash here is between structure, business-like, and then the humanities and the compassion and how I'm going to save the world. And how do we, and I think there's a clash there, because we try to impose one kind of system on a different value system. And this has been a real discussion in Catalyst 2030. And I think that's core to spreading of networks and how to get people on board. So with that, I'm going to ask Ahmad to elaborate, because you had really great, fantastic ideas and experiences on how do you get members to get them satisfied and everybody, so it's a win-win.
Well, exactly. So the challenge about the main challenge that I wanted to talk about today is the value proposition challenge, and that's something very hard of how you have to keep tailoring your value proposition to your members. Sometimes it just happens, and it will click, but most of the time it won't. And successful networks require a very detailed value proposition, and the model that we discussed earlier when we were preparing for this session is there are two main elements for a successful network, and it actually goes back to that before people start believing in the cause. So before people start believing in the cause, you have two parts of the equation. The first one is people that have needs. So people that have some needs. In our case, they are students that they want to support in research. They want to be part of a scientific network, to learn science, to know about the latest advances in science, and so on. And the second part of the equation that you should utilize very very efficiently is that people that want to give back. And for example, we have another network, like other than the general network, we have an AI lab here in Jordan. And this AI lab is based on training people, training like young researchers in AI, and then adding them as part of the network. But the real training happens when senior researchers from around the globe, they help us on the pro bono in their own time, because they want to see a network of young AI researchers in the region. So why are they giving so much time to this network? Well, no, there are many reasons to that. Number one is sometimes they want to pay back to their country, they want to pay back to their region. That's a very important attractive value to them. They want to be part of a place where they can give to. That's another important value to them. And the third is for the future. So many of these people work in like big companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, or whatever, and they feel like their current place is they're just doing the same job every day. But maybe this place, it's a research lab. In that case, it has a very bright future for them to be part of and leading. So if you achieve these two very important components, like you want to bring people who have needs, and you bring people who want to give to fill all those needs, that you're halfway there. And if you're halfway there, you can build upon that. Why is that very important? Because the hardest thing in communities is that they have so many variables. Like they have so many variables. I'm certain that everyone who leads a community agree to that. It's like there's a platform, there's communications, there are people who want to join, there are people who are requesting what we're doing here. You need to fill that all of those requests constantly, and then there are the people who are giving the network, and then you need to keep all these meetings. It's fun when they are the first 4 meetings, but then it's not fun anymore. It's becoming very hard and very demanding. And because of all those variables, you need to find a very static model that would be very coherent. Despite all the other variables, it will grow and it will continue to survive. And so that was the main challenge regarding to value proposition, and how you can try to overcome that challenge through developing that very strong model inside your community.
Thank you. You actually that's a great description of the format and putting your finger on those 2 important points. I want to add here is talking about the burnout, right? The first 4 meetings are fun, and then it becomes a overwhelming burden in a way. Although we always dredge up those last, drops of energy and that enthusiasm, and that's how we got you here on the panel, even though you're sick. But I want to say here, that's why maybe we need to shift how we look at it. When it's a social movement kind of way, where it's an open community, where the core is not somebody creating the meeting or the hub or the focus. Rather, each person becomes a hub. And so if each person becomes a hub, they go up and down depending on their energy, but there's always that low hum of energy going through because it's so loose. And I want to reflect here, there's not enough time to discuss this, but what can we learn from biology about this, right? And maybe look at nature and nature of networks, how they evolve, right? Usually there's not a hierarchy, it's each one alone. I mean, we can look at COVID as an example. We can look at other microorganisms or fungi and look at how they spread their networks. It's all based on the individual, not necessarily a hierarchy, or that hierarchy only comes in certain periods of time of crisis. But the fundamental network, the fundamental base is you are strong as your weakest link, right? It's that individual. So focusing on the individual, making sure that individual feels empowered, talking about agency, like, all right, you want to be part of this network, go do with it whatever you want, rather than how can I serve you? What can you do for me? So again, moving from that business model back to the more natural organic model. And I think to me, this is a call out for people who want to study these things, study networks, try to see the similarity in biology, which are populations, right? Communities of different organisms. And how can we learn from biology as well in this thing. All right, so I'm going to give a quick round of questions here as I read the chat. If anybody wants to jump in, what platforms do you use? So now that we're in the post-COVID world, and we're in the digital age and artificial intelligence and technology, and people are not able to meet in person without underestimating the importance of human-human interaction. One of the struggles in platforms is what platform to use. I mean, there's so many now, and more are popping out. So if you want to really quick, just give a recommendation of a few of the ones you've tested that you think work, while we then invite the audience to jump in. Please, you don't have to raise your hand. I mean, raise your hand and just unmute yourself and speak. So quick round. Tonya, what platforms have you found really important?
These are really, determined by the chapters themselves, actually. Each country's got different Wi-Fi requirements, different platforms. Some countries don't get any reception. Zoom doesn't operate in some countries, we've found. So, since the chapters are organizing their own meetings, they go ahead and, they find their platforms. It depends if it's a national or if it's a regional or an international. Obviously, there are different platforms that work better. I was very interested to find that the Zimbabwe national chapter, for example, found the best way for them to interact, even doing seminars, was through WhatsApp. I didn't know you could do that on WhatsApp, but they have whole meetings, or videos and everything through WhatsApp as a group. We've even been doing some filmmaking with people in the national chapters who are and that's all been done through WhatsApp tutorials and things like that. So I think it's really it really depends on the resources of the different countries.
Thank you. Lindsay, what have you been using?
To be honest, we have used lots of Google Meets because it's very friendly. When we have something formal like executive committee meetings, and we use Zoom, but in general we use Google Meets, and with this facility to register in the calendar and then trying to make use of all these resources. And I just wanted to make a quick comment when you say burnout and we like the word dynamic and alive community. And just to give you a contrasting example, one of the leaders we we admire, but she's retired already. She was 15 years the head of the president of the Guatemala Women Association of Scientists. And now we have this 4 years limit. And we are considering the proposal in Guatemala to limit ourselves to 2 years, because we have given everything from us, but I cannot imagine myself being 15 years in a position. So it's we want to shorten it. So just a comment on that. But in terms of the platforms, Google Meets has been very helpful for us.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And your point about shortening, rotating, keeping that new fresh blood coming in is very, very important. Totally, that's another very good point. Ahmad.
Well, regarding the platforms, there is a spectrum of platforms. There are different levels you can work on. It depends actually on your people, your structure, and what kind of, and how many are they. So the simplest way to manage a network is to use the free social media platforms that are out there. You might need a Facebook group, but you have to be very active there. You might, if your network is on the more professional level, you can use a LinkedIn group that works excellent as well. And of course, you can keep with all the other communication platforms that they mentioned. However, sometimes you can go to a much higher level with your platform. So for example, at FI, we use a professional social media social networking platform. It's called HiveBright. HiveBright is one of the platforms that it gives you your own white labeled platform. There's another very strong platform that I love, but I have never used. It's called Localized. It's focused for the MENA region. So Localized is a very strong platform. And there are many others. Like if you just Google build my own community on a professional platform, you would have like the top 10 out there. But the only concern is like those platforms require a very high financial commitment, especially on smaller societies. It can range from 6,000 to 20,000 per year, depending on your number and depending on what platform you choose. But if you think that there is a huge value proposition for that, if you have paid membership in your community, you can achieve that. And another way those professional platforms give you is you can develop your community on a mobile application as well. And if you have a mobile application, now you are much more dynamic. Now you're doing all of your events on your platform. You can access people immediately. So there's a pros and cons for each platform. You can start very simple with the free platforms out there, but if your network is growing, you can reach like one of the professional ones, and that would synergize your activity much more as well as you go down the road.
Thank you. That was a good round. And in Catalyst, we use Zoho, and I know lots of people use Slack. People are in the chat are mentioning Yammer. I mean, I know there's like plenty, and we love reading. We're trying to figure out doing WhatsApp and so on. Cleanse, you wanted to say something? And before I ask the audience.
Maybe Ahmad can give us some more advice, because when we have a problem is in the storage. Okay, interacting is easy, but when we leave the executive committee, we want to leave behind, and for the next executive committee, all the paper trail, not paper, but digital memories. And then we are using Google Drive, but it's very quickly finishes and we don't have financial resources. How to leave all these memories clearly labeled for the next group to continue building and not to start from zero, for example.
Ahmad, if you briefly answer that, and so we go to the audience.
The shortest way to do that is simply if you have like Google G Suite, like they have a special suite for companies and startups and nonprofits. So you can use that. Maybe if you have like 5 accounts on that G Suite for recovery, but everyone else would have their normal Gmail accounts. That would be the shortest solution for this problem. However, there are many storage platforms that might help you. Like if you have an office, you will have your storage for you for free up to 1 tera, I believe. You have other. There is something called Box for storage, and all that, like they're very cheap for storage. So these are one of the quickest solutions. But I believe this is one of the challenges that you might face. We can discuss that later in detail.
Yeah, that's separate. Maybe we should put a panel on that. Okay, I just threw it in to get more people from the audience to step up. So David Hackett, I want to invite you on this panel. You should have been a member because your comments are amazing. You actually pointed to, it doesn't really matter what platform, because if the people are not interested to use it, even if you have the fanciest with all the whistles and bells and nobody's interested. So it's really, and I agree with you 100%. We love reading. We were agonizing over a platform, and then I stepped back and I said, wait a minute. Who cares what platform? If people can figure out how to talk to each other, if it's by the phone or WhatsApp or whatever, they can figure it out. What matters is that ecosystem, that community. So David, would you like to elaborate on your thoughts and comments, please? The floor is yours.
Well, that's born out of my own experience where platforms just arise and people bond to it and love it and participate heavily. And others that look like they would be far more successful, have bombed. So I would de-emphasize, just like Ahmad said, start with one and start seeing what your experience is. And there are new ones coming out all the time. I just this week was invited to try out Spider Oak Crossclave in a kind of a beta. But it's an interactive platform with loads of space available, and so their new ones are coming out all the time. My big concern with them is security, and that should be a rising matter of concern for anybody in these groups, because you hardly, even if you think you don't need it, you're going to need it because the harvesting and so on that goes on.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you very much, David. I don't know if you wanted you or Anna or Ricardo or whoever from the audience would like to elaborate from your personal experiences that you've mentioned in the chat about how to facilitate the network and how does leadership come into that? I mean, in the chat, I'm seeing this discussion of leadership is important, but you don't want too much. So from your experience, do you have any thoughts or advice on that? Because now this is the last part. We're going to go around and ask for best practices, recommendations that we can go home with, all of us, to do something practical. So from the audience, anybody would like to jump in and share?
Hi everyone.
Please.
Well, I think in my experience, it's very important the role of the leadership. I mean, there is always just a few people that are responsible for making, the majority to dance. So it's an ongoing work, the leadership. However, I would say that we have the two role models. The former one that we all here are tacitly and explicitly trying to avoid. It's the command and control leadership, we won't put it behind. However, there is a new kind of leadership that is a facilitator. So facilitation, demands a strategic communication. I mean, how you engage people, how do you inspire, how do you motivate them? So if we have a clear strategic communication in place to help the leadership, he or she can be a tremendous facilitator. So the tech platform and things like that, we can leave it for behind. The most important thing, it's really to have a clear idea on how you are going to put in place a strategic communication which enables people to participate and not to stifle them. That's basically my experience.
No, you're absolutely true. It's moving into that facilitative role. And I think that's all over the world. We find that in all sectors, in creating communities, in education, in politics. How do we become the facilitators and allow the people to lead and go and just be the motivators, the inspirers, which needs a lot of good communication skills, as you say. I mean, at Catalyst 2030, we see it in Jeru's leadership and in other networks. I mean, I'm sure each one of you in your own networks, you found that the leader who has been inspirational without being in the limelight has been the one that has been most successful. We have another quick question from Yasmin from Catalyst 2030, which is how can the function of a secretariat best serve the members of a network? Wow, that's a very big question, and I think it's what Ricardo just mentioned about this, real leading by example, being a role model, and inspiring people to find more in themselves than they realize. Right, that selfless trust, respect, believing in others, so that you foster that agency, that feeling of confidence in each member, to think that she or he are very important and they have something to give. I think if a leader can help achieve that in the members, then each member becomes, a powerhouse. So I'm going to go around. We have 4 minutes left. So I'm going to go around to each panelist to give us one recommendation / best practice that is practical, that we can go home and do, right? Not something about changing laws or, but something really practical. Each person here in the audience and each person here can take home and implement or think about how can she or he do. And I'll start with Tonya. The floor is yours.
Really hard to come up with just one recommendation here. Sorry about that. And there's so many things I wanted to pick up on. I mean, I think it's a focus in some way on a sense of belonging. It's really the thing that's been a miracle for me about OWSD. When I first started at OWSD, I didn't understand the members were already enthusiastic and there was nothing there for them. They were already they already wanted to be part of this organization, and I was racking my brains saying, well, why, they don't get a badge, they don't get any, what is it that they're getting? And that's what we had to find out, and that's what we've had to that's the thing that's had to become, you know, the thing that we've kind of formalized, but it's really just and it's having an identity that stands the test of time. I think it comes back to the discussion right at the beginning, you know, is this just a movement, or is it an organization, or, you know, what's the difference, and why don't you just have a flat, you know, it comes back to all of these questions that everybody's been asking, you know, what do you need the leadership? I think you do. I think you need a leadership too. But I'm coming back to Klein's idea that I don't think we should think that leadership is permanent. Leadership is an opportunity. It's and especially in women in STEM, for example, where, you know, leadership itself and responsibility is one of the indicators of excellence that you need in your career, and you're excluded everywhere else. You can't get in the door, you can't get into the academy, right? You don't have all the qualifications, the experience, you're blocked out. Instead, these kinds of organizations, they give you, you know, kind of mini versions of the structure all the way along. So at any point in time, you know, we've got affiliate members who don't have master's degrees yet, but they can be on the executive board if they want to. You know, you can slot in and you can get the experience, and then you get the confidence, and you can move along. And it's not about being in charge or controlling. It's about taking ownership and saying, I can do this actually. And then once I've learned how to do it, I want to pass it on to somebody else. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Clinzy. But let's try to be brief, so we only have. So, Clinzy, give us a recommendation from your experience.
Sure, it's related with what Tonya said. Well, get to know the members, each of the 400 in the case of Guatemala, because we have to be creative and get out of the box. Use their talents in the way they want to. For example, there was an expert, a scientist in health, and we have a women in health team, but she wanted to be part of the communication team because she loves social media, and then she's really good at that. So she was free to use the talents she has the way she wants. So being creative and get to know the members.
I love that. Let them do what they want, the way they want it, and just let go. Ahmad.
Well, very, very practical, very important advice is for any successful community, you need to ensure very strong communication, especially at the beginning. That's extremely important. That's just an addition to what my colleagues just mentioned. After you have the value proposition set right, after your people feel this sense of belonging and everyone is contributing, if you don't have communication, like daily sometimes communication, you will lose it. People will lose it. Everyone is extremely busy, and they're already belonging to many other communities, especially after COVID. Many online platforms are coming, and if you're not ensuring constant communication with your members, you will not succeed in implementing it properly.
Thank you. Thank you all for your wonderful recommendations. Thank you, audience, for all your comments and sharing of your experience and your wisdom. And hopefully we will take all of these and incorporate them, learn from them, each one of us in our own networks to connect with people all over the world and be part of the whole humanity, the community of humanity, to achieve the SDGs, achieve a better life for everyone and future generations and our young generations who have been participating in our panel here with Clinzy. So thank you very much, and let's stay connected. Email us. You can always find us anywhere online. Take care. Salam.
Thank you very much.
Salam.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.